some of them are mad. I mean, because even if they pay, I said, how can they vote? I said, he's never been how can you vote? And then I said, you know, these people are very strong moral. And I said, how can you vote for somebody who brags? How can you brags about calling letter 6 outside here? And I'm like, what are you doing? I said, well, I can't use my gift for ice cream. No. From the rest. No, but I mean, if she ever, she has and then we have the failures. How can you get them?
I went to the Yeah, no, maybe he was just planning to be there, like, just a little time for the
Okay, we would like to restart or start again or continue with the program, please. Just for a couple of minutes, I would like to invite Mr. Marwan Ahmed to just make a quick announcement, and then I'll introduce His Excellency, the Bishop.
So I'd like to announce a festival that's coming up in 2 weeks from this weekend. It's called Al-Quds Festival. Al-Quds is Jerusalem in Arabic language. So we have flyers here. I'm going to pass them around. We're going to have a lot of music, dance, food, cultural vendors, and an art exhibit as well about the Palestinian culture. This is going to be an annual event. It's going to be in Alexandria at Durant Art Center. If you're free, please join us. Bring your friends. You're going to have a nice day with a lot of entertainment and food. Thank you. I'm going to pass these slides.
At this point, it gives me a great honor to welcome with us Bishop Roy Edward Campbell Jr. His Excellency was born on November 19th, 1947, and he has had a lifelong member of the Archdiocese of Washington. He was baptized at St. Mary Star of the Sea in Indian Head, Maryland. Received his first communion in 1956 at St. Cyprian Church in Southeast Washington, and the sacrament of confirmation in 1959 at the Shrine of the Sacred Heart Church in Northwest Washington. He has been committed throughout his life as an active Catholic, both in parishes and the broader Washington area community, serving as lector and usher at the Shrine of the Sacred Heart, and as a member on the pastoral and finance councils. He has also had an interest at young age in a vocation to the priesthood. And His Excellency Bishop Roy Edward Campbell is here on behalf of Cardinal World and his colleague and our friend Bishop Nestout is on our advisory board, and we are so happy to have you with us. If you could come forward and share a few remarks.
Thank you all so much. Thank you for allowing me to be with you and to share just a brief reflection about what Jerusalem means to us Christians. Well, in a word, it means what our Lord has been trying to tell us from the time He walked the face of the earth until now through the gospel He left us. It means living that gospel. It means loving God by the way we love one another. And Jerusalem is the place where His footsteps touch the ground. That's the area where He lived when He chose to live among us as one of us, to set an example that we might follow as men and women to this day. Our Lord never refused anyone who came to Him. He did not look at one person and say, "You're better than another." He did not spurn anyone because of their circumstances in life. but he chose to embrace everyone where they were. Now that's an example we need, and that is, since Jerusalem was where he decided that he would make amends for all the wrongs that man had done and man will do by his own suffering, his death, and his resurrection. That is the place where we look to so that we will have the opportunity to follow in his footsteps wherever we are, wherever we live, and for whatever we do. Jerusalem sets an example because our Lord chose to live among us and to do his work in that city. And he calls us to do that work wherever we are, so that Jerusalem is a new Jerusalem, and the Jerusalem there will exemplify what he has asked us to do. There should be no people, Palestinian, Jewish, Syrian, Egyptian, there should be no people that have to fight for an existence and representation in this world today. Everyone should have the justice of being recognized as a people with the same dignity as any other person. And Jerusalem today shows us that this coming together in this place represents just that from a religious standpoint. We have three major faiths that lay claim to Jerusalem, and all of them justly. And if our religion for our God says that we focus on that, then our lives and living that religion, whether it's Jewish, whether it's Muslim, whether it's Christian, should reflect the belief we have in the sacredness of that space. So what I have to say is that it is so important that the religion that we all hold on to, whatever it is, that tells us that we have a right to worship our God the way that we have been brought up, that we have a right to live wherever we are, the way that those around us live. We have a right to self-governance. We have a right to treat others as neighbors equal to ourselves. All takes place in this place where God himself chose to come among us and live as one of us. And now he calls us to make Jerusalem not just this one place in one geographical location, but to spread this unity all around the world, wherever we live. If it weren't for Jerusalem, none of us would be practicing those three major religions. It all came together there, and it did so that we can take the example of that unity and spread it wherever we go. So as a Christian, I look at Jerusalem as where our Lord set the example in physical form of how we're to live. And now it is my job, it is my calling, and it's all of ours to do the same, so that Jerusalem exists where we are, and it all stems from that location in the Middle East. Thank you. Yes.
Allow me now to introduce our next event. We are going to be showing a documentary, a documentary called Juduri, My Roots in Arabic, or Juduri in Arabic, My Roots. It's a documentary by Lubna Turjman, and we have with us Mai Kafati, who is a Honduran Palestinian, and as such, she was born in the heart of Central America, but is originally from the heart of the world.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that introduction. For 23 years, when people asked me where I was from, I would naturally answer, oh, from Honduras. But after the Know Thy Heritage program, the right to be Palestinian again was returned to me, finally, after 23 years. The producer, thank you. The producer of this documentary, Lubna Turjuman, grew up in a sister country of mine called Guatemala. And while she was growing up, her father always taught her and her siblings about Palestine and about their Palestinian roots. So they grew up with that sense of belonging, with that sense of appreciation for the Palestinian culture as they were growing up in Guatemala. At a personal level, she had always wanted to do a tribute, a film that was a tribute to her dad, to his story, and to Palestine. KTH, as a program, enabled her to experience in depth the thriving ways in which Palestinian communities are getting by despite the challenges of an occupation. And I highly encourage you all to promote this program, Know Thy Heritage. If you know anyone between the ages of 18 or 30, or you are yourself between the ages of 18 or 30, I encourage you to join this life-changing experience. It certainly was to me. It certainly was to many other young Palestinians. In Lubna's particular case, which is the reason we are here today, this trip, as it has been to many other Palestinians, really re-energized her commitment to Palestine. And this motivated her to tell her dad's story. So it is interesting, and I just learned this, that Turjuman means the tour guide. So without further ado, let us allow her tour us through her roots.
Hola, papi.
Hola, Luna, ¿cómo está?
Bien, ¿cómo está usted?
Bien, preocupado por usted.
¿Por qué?
Porque está muy lejos.
Ah, me extraña.
Mucho.
¿Está listo?
Ya estoy terminando.
Como le había explicado, yo lo quería entrevistar porque estoy editando lo que filmé en Palestina cuando fui, ¿se acuerdan?
Sí, hija, me acuerdo. Palestina es mi país donde nací, donde está toda la historia de mi familia, mis raíces. Eso es lo más profundo.
Scarf off, then they will not turn us around or give us a hard time, okay? When we get, you'll see the other side of Bethlehem on the checkpoints, how we're gonna get in. Just hide it, put it somewhere else, and then we'll get back to it. Yes? Okay,
Nací en Palestina, Jerusalén, en el 1955, después del Nakba, el desastre que le hicieron al pueblo palestino, de arrebatarlo su tierra y hacerlo refugiar en todos lados. Y mi familia vivía en el West Jerusalem y tuvo que refugiarse al East Jerusalem. Perdió su casa.
¿Me puede describir cómo era su vida creciendo en Jerusalén?
Muy bonita, llena de tranquilidad. Después de la ocupación fue la primera vez que yo vi una guerra que la llamaron la guerra del 67 y era muy triste, ¿no? Y habíamos perdido nuestra libertad.
Guatemala.
What? Huh?
Guatemala.
Oh, Guatemala.
Where are you from?
Originally, I grew up in the States, but now I live here.
Oh, that's nice. Where did you grow up in this
I
States?
grew up in Florida.
What part?
Boca Raton. I speak Arabic. I know a few words here and there, like Takhabab, Wakif Wakif, Shwaya Shwaya, Salam Alaikum. This is the pin of the battalion. You get that after a year. It's when you're officially a member of the battalion. This is called Sikat Lochem, Warriors pin. It takes you, that's when you finish all of your training. They give that to you.
You get that before you
You get this one before you get this one. This is after around 7 months. This is after a year. And this is my rank, sergeant. So you get that after you've been in the army for a while. So, you know, it's like kind of like the army is a messed up version of the Boy Scouts.
Bueno, he regresado cuando he podido regresar, ¿verdad? Y es triste cuando uno regresa a su tierra, que un extranjero le está preguntando a qué se debe su visita a Palestina o a qué viene.
As much discreetly as possible.
Are you American?
Originally, yes.
Oh, okay.
Boca Raton. I gotta go, but she knows my whole story apparently.
Oh, okay.
Hey, enjoy your trip.
Cuando viene un ejército armado y ocupa su ciudad y su país, es algo muy duro para la población y de ver todas las injusticias que cometen, en usurpar más tierras, en negarse la libertad de moverse, de vivir, de trabajar. Se vuelve su vida como que uno está preso en su propio país, ¿no? Está en una prisión. Siente uno muy orgulloso de ser palestino y ser parte de ese pueblo heroico, ese pueblo que lo han tratado de eliminar desde hace muchos años, pero es un pueblo que sigue vivo y sigue de pie y sigue con la cabeza en alto.
سنة بتلعب زي دي ماريا؟
ايوه واليوم
ولا انت احسن؟
لا انا احسن
ومين كاسياس؟
ايوه كاسياس
هاي كاسياس انت ماسك
مين انت؟ انا اللي علمت انا اللي علمت
Nunca se volvía Jerusalén ni Palestina, ¿verdad? Me acuerdo de sus frutas, de las comidas, de los paseos. En especial en Jerusalén, cuando camina uno en los mercados, los olores a las especies, especialmente cuando uno va acercándose a su camino a la calle cristiana para ir al Santo Sepulcro, los olores a incenso, ¿verdad? Todo eso son recuerdos también. Las campanas, también las mezquitas que están llamando al rezo, todo eso. Ese es Jerusalén. mí fue siempre importante enseñar a mis hijos de ser palestinos y de conocer la cultura y la causa palestina. Porque en esta manera todos los palestinos que están dentro de fuera o la diáspora o fuera de Palestina han logrado mantenerse la causa palestina viva, pues, ¿verdad? Los niños ya somos viejos y nuestros nietos y nuestros hijos no se olvidan. Estoy orgulloso de haberlo logrado con mis hijos y con toda mi familia. Como le digo a tu mamá, lo que no he logrado en mi vida es algo muy importante, que ninguna hija se va a casar con un palestino. Pues búscate un palestino profesional, pues decente.
Okay, papi. Bye.
Bye.
I love you.
I love you too.
Bye.
Bye. Ciao. Ciao. Dios.
Come on, I just want to say a few words. This is a program taking the Palestinian origin to Palestine. And I ran 7 trips to Palestine. I have 270 young men and women, mostly women actually. 80% of them, they come. The men only 20%. And then I had to say to them, that's I bring you actually because I want you to carry the luggage for the women. But really, everyone went with us. It changed completely. It's like this lady, all her life in Honduras. I don't want to mix between the Latin America, South and West, and we will be in trouble. But Lubna lives in London. She was interned to the PLO office there, and then she's went with us and have that documentary. And every one of them, they are doing something, In Honduras, in some of the cities, Honduras, yes, they start having political activities for Palestine because they start knowing, what's going on there. And this is something, now this program was for 7 years as a program of HCEF. Took off. Now we started to have standalone organization. We are developing its board of directors to become NGO by itself and to have our birthright organization to help the rest of them, in order to be Palestinian again. I guess I wanna. If you have any question about it or any program, we have brochures outside. Please, if you have, we take people over 30 a little bit, but not too old. But unless if you can fit in with the group, and this is the best things we could do for our young people. Saliba, I'm finished. I just thought to say something about the program, and thank you for all for watching this, and thank you for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that documentary, and thank you, Lubna Turjman, for doing that. We now come to the last panel, last event, last but not least. This event focuses on Israel, Palestine, Jerusalem, and the prospects of peace, regional and international influences. And I'm so happy that we have with us His Excellency Ambassador Hussam Zomlot, Head PLO General Delegation to the United States. If you can join us, please. And we have with us Mr. Khalil Jahshan, who is Executive Director of the Arab Center, Washington, D.C., Inc. And we have with us Dr. James Zughbi, President of the Arab American Institute. I just want to remind you that we are streaming live on Facebook and YouTube. And when the time comes to ask questions, please speak cogently, clearly, and ask a question as opposed to going into a whole dissertation, so we could entertain several questions. I will not try to take anybody's thunder away, but I want to make an introductory remark to this panel to put things in context. The prospects of peace between Palestine and Israel are almost non-existent or not on the near horizon. I hope I am wrong, but that's the condition now. Israel has been on a fast track to transform Jerusalem and beyond in its own image, always creating facts on the ground. The recent reconciliation between Fatah and Hamas, aside from helping those living in Gaza, enables one Palestinian voice to deal in negotiations with Israel. But the challenges are huge. As the Middle East undergoes further transformations and realignments, examples, ongoing neutralization of IS, Syria's civil war, and the Yemen war and their resultant humanitarian tragedies, disagreements between Saudi Arabia and Iran and their proxy wars in the Middle East, the shunning of Qatar by some of the Arab states, but the unspoken relations between Israel and some Arab Gulf states, the increased Russian influence in the Middle East, all of these examples, we see that the U.S. remains unclear about its overall strategy for Palestinian-Israeli negotiations. There does not seem to be a sustained attention span or intentionality of trying to resolve this continuing issue, including the issue of Jerusalem. As we reflect on the centennial of the Balfour Declaration, which will come on November the 2nd, we need to be resilient and vigilant so as to stay away from the machinations of the past. The ultimate goal should be to guide efforts that support peace, prosperity, and security between the two states of Israel and Palestine, and that advance Jerusalem as the city of peace for all. What are the constraints? What are the opportunities? And I will go according to the schedule by first introducing His Excellency Ambassador Hussam Zomlot. His Excellency is currently the Chief Representative of the Palestinian General Delegation to the United States. He also serves as Strategic Advisor to Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. The ambassador's previous official roles include serving as Ambassador at Large for the Palestinian Presidency and Chargé d'Affaires of the Palestinian Mission to the United Kingdom. He was recently elected to the Fatah Council and Director of the Foreign Relations Commission. Previously, he was Professor of Public Policy at Birzeit University and co-founded and chaired the Birzeit School of Government. He held teaching and research positions at Harvard University and the University of London. His professional experiences include working as an economist for the United Nations, economic researcher at the London School of Economics and the Palestine Economic Policy Research Institute. He holds a PhD in economics from the University of London. He is married and has 2 children. Ambassador, if you could go ahead, and then I'll introduce the next speaker and the next.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. This is very generous of you. Good afternoon, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Allow me first, before I start, to really thank the organizers, the HCEF, I must really say it in a right order, the Holy Land Christian Economical Foundation. Hmm?
It's economic, but ecumenical would be
I have a
better.
PhD, I have a PhD in economics, economical. And my brother and my friend Ratib Saeed, Ratib Rabi'a. Sorry, what's wrong with me today? What did I have?
What do you have for lunch?
What did I have for breakfast? That's the first question. Ratib Rabi'a and all those on the board of this esteemed organization for organizing this symposium. Thank you, Ratib. And I was touched by what I have been hearing about the great work of your institution. I just returned from one of the Latin American countries you get confused with. It's Nicaragua. Managua, Nicaragua. أهلاً كيفك؟ أهلاً. Managua, Nicaragua. And there I met the leaders and the representatives of the Palestinian community in Latin America and the Caribbean from 19 countries, actually. And how touched I was that some of them have been to your and with your tours to the Holy Land, to Palestine, and how much that has been very impactful on their lives and on the way they do things. We just met one of your young intakes, and I was extremely touched by what I saw from Lubna. I know she was entering with the PLO office there, but the work she did is exactly how we want the new generation of Palestinians to come forth. And we see a wave of our Palestinian diaspora. I don't like the word diaspora, I more like the word exiled refugees and expats. Some of them have left on their own, but they are expats rather than diaspora. We do have a center of gravity still. The second thing, I'm really honored, sir, to have put me in such a distinguished panel. Those are mentors of mine, and those are people I always seek their guidance and leadership. Jim Zobi, I always tell Abu Mazen, our president, that you know, Jim is the real Palestinian ambassador here. We come, we go, but Jim stays, and has been such.
Do I get a car?
You
only get a driver.
Jim stays, and we always salute his contribution to the cause of justice and the cause of peace. And of course, my very good friend, Professor Khalil, for the decades of contribution and the pride we have to see him as one of the intellectuals of this country who contribute to the knowledge and to the advancement of the U.S. understanding to Palestine. It's an honor to be with you, my colleagues. And of course, not to mention the Arab Center. And thirdly and finally, it's such an honor to be at the Jerusalem Fund. This is a Palestinian home par excellence, and a home that has kept Palestine alive in the U.S. in good times and in bad times. We remember Sharabi, and we remember all the great leaders who have established this institution. For me, it's a great honor to be at the Jerusalem Fund. This is my first time in the fund as an ambassador, but I've been here several times, and hopefully I'll be visiting. Where is Muhammad? Is he around? Well, hello, Muhammad. Hello, Muhammad. And through Muhammad, this is a message of appreciation and respect and gratitude to the board of the fund and to all those who have made it possible. The topic of today, Jerusalem, the city for peace for all, is really the right topic. And I've just heard the Bishop Campbell. Talking about the way he as a bishop, he as a Christian leader sees Jerusalem, and this is exactly the way we see Jerusalem. We see Jerusalem as the city of God and the city of peace and the city of togetherness, the city of all, the city that has a place for every faith, for every believer. And it is for that purpose, Jerusalem in Arabic is called Al-Quds. Quds is sacred, and Jerusalem has three main dimensions for us Palestinians. The first dimension, it is sacred. And we know that as much as it is sacred for the majority of the Palestinian people being Muslims and being Christians, it is sacred for all monolithic religions. It is sacred for billions of people. And this is something not only we acknowledge, but we celebrate, that Jerusalem is the city worshipped by the three monolithic religions. However, it is crucial that this is not done in a way that gives monopoly of one group over the other. And while Jerusalem has been existing as an open city for many years, the last 70 years, particularly 50 years since the occupation, has been the anomaly of the history, of the very proud history of Jerusalem. And for us, that nature of Jerusalem being sacred is a gate to peace and a bridge between civilizations and a bridge between religions. And we cherish as Palestinians that aspect of Jerusalem, Al-Quds being sacred. But Jerusalem for us is not just about religion. Crucial it is, important it is. The spiritual side of Jerusalem is respected, but there are two other important sides to Jerusalem for us. The first is national. Jerusalem is our national gravity. Jerusalem is not just a Palestinian city, which is, but it is our national gravity in the historic sense, in the cultural sense, in the services sense. By the way, up until now, despite all the severing and the checkpoints, Jerusalem serves as a main hub. You know, I used to study at Birzeit University in the early 90s, and when you are sick, you go to be treated in Jerusalem. Until now, by the way, the main hospitals, the major hospitals for Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza are in Jerusalem, without naming them, but several of them, the major hospitals. If you want to go and watch a good cultural event, it's Jerusalem. Until now, by the way. And that national character of Jerusalem is crucial for us Palestinians in all of its aspects. People think of Jerusalem only in terms of its religious dimension, but the national dimension for us is not less crucial. And the third dimension is political. I mean, Jerusalem is and has been the hub of Palestinian political life and presence. Despite the closure of the Orient House and despite all the attempts, Jerusalem remains to be our political hub. And for us, Jerusalem, East Jerusalem represents and will be our capital, not as a demand. And this is a point I'd like really to stress. Calling for East Jerusalem to be the capital of the state of Palestine is not a Palestinian demand. It's a Palestinian concession. And it's a very painful concession. But it's a crucial concession for the sake of peace. A crucial step in that direction. You've just heard the story of Lubna and her father. He was born in West Jerusalem. He and his family owned their home in West Jerusalem. We owned West Jerusalem before 1948. In Talbiyah, and Al Katamon, and Al Malha, and everywhere. We owned West Jerusalem. But for the sake of peace, for being aligned with international consensus and legitimacy, we offered a compromise to accept East Jerusalem being our capital. And believe you me, that concession is not going to change an ounce. So people think that East Jerusalem is something that we claim. No, East Jerusalem is something we own. The property right is with us until today. 360,000 Palestinians own almost every home, every shop, every public place, every private place in Jerusalem. So it's also a matter of ownership. This is not something we claim from above. You've seen the hundreds of thousands of Jerusalemites in the streets of Jerusalem in July, defending their properties and defending their rights. And therefore, it is crucial for us to understand the issue of Jerusalem from that prism. And we have been following also the Israeli policy in Jerusalem since Israel has occupied the east part of the city. And it's primarily three legs for their policy. The first leg is to deconstruct the society, weaken the society. And for that, they use an array of tools and policies, be it legal. The moment Israel occupied East Jerusalem, they declared the entire population of Jerusalem, the original Jerusalemite, to be aliens. You know that? They just landed from Mars. They were not there before the occupation, when in fact they were in their homes. So that legal starting point for the occupation made the people in Jerusalem almost foreigners to their own cities, And since then, the array of legal instruments applied against them are just countless, from giving them temporary residency in their own city to confiscating their IDs for many illegitimate reasons, including just living a year or two in the US, for study and what have you. They have been deploying legal means at full. The second is economic means. I mean, the deprivation that Israel has really exercised in East Jerusalem is just disgusting, if I may use the term, over the years. And look at the indicators, the economic indicators, and compare between the west side of the city and the east side of the city. It's targeted to weaken the society, to fragment the society. The social policies Israel has been using of encouraging actually some phenomena like drugs and crimes and not countering them, of not even collecting garbage from the streets, is targeted to weaken the society. But that's their bottom-up approach, bottom-up strategy of targeting the society. But they have a top-down strategy, a top-down policy, which is attack the leadership of Jerusalem, the institutions of Jerusalem, the national places of Jerusalem. It is not a coincidence that they closed the Orient House, because they don't want any national representation in Jerusalem. And you know, it's under the assumption that a leaderless society is an easier society to be targeted and to be fragmented. That's the first leg, which is targeting the social cohesion. The second leg is replacing this weakened, quote-unquote, society, replacing it. And the campaign is relentless, ongoing since 1967, on a daily basis. Only last week, you've followed the announcement by the Israeli government of hundreds more of units in East Jerusalem, thousands. An unabated displacement and replacement, they call it diversity. What? Diversity. It is a replacement, it is a displacement first and replacement. This is a colonization strategy, nothing else. Colonial mindset. And the third and the last leg of their policy in Jerusalem is the Israelization of our people in Jerusalem. By means of curriculum, go and see the battle that has been waged between the Palestinian Authority and the Israeli authorities in East Jerusalem over the last few months. So many attempts to introduce the Israeli narrative to our children and our kids. Huge battle. They have not won it so far, and they will not. And the Israelization is not just by mean of education, which is very serious. Education is actually the most irreversible. But by legal ways, the giving of the citizenship, the what have you. The change of the nature of the city from all of its aspects. But here we go. We have 4 defenses in the face of this relentless campaign. The first defense is our great people in Jerusalem. You've seen them a couple of months ago. They are as solid as the holy rock of Jerusalem, the dome of the rock. And you've seen their resilience, you've seen their commitment, you've seen their collective act, you've seen how inspiring they were using the prayer mattress as a mean of resistance. What a scene. What a great scene. And their message was loudly heard everywhere. Everywhere. That while they are on a daily basis butting up and butting against all these policies, surviving, steadfasting, remaining, when it comes to their sacred places, they will stand together in the most humane, united way possible. That has actually pushed and enforced their will on the occupier. And Netanyahu had to reverse his steps around the Haram al-Sharif. The second line of defense is the Palestinian people at large. You've seen that sense of unity around them. Jerusalem is the one thing that unites every Palestinian, be it from Nablus or from Honduras. Where is the young lady from Honduras? I always make a joke that 2 things unite the Palestinians: Jerusalem and Muhammad Assaf. But Jerusalem is really the one thing that every Palestinian associates with. That's why I say it has a national dimension, not just religious. It's a matter of identity, of who we are, of our center of gravity. It's our compass. Can I use that term, Professor?
It's all yours.
So, Where was I? In Jerusalem. I was in Jerusalem.
We're still in Jerusalem.
And we're still in Jerusalem. And I was saying the second line of defense is the Palestinian people. And you've seen the people in the West Bank, you've seen the people in Gaza, you've seen the Palestinian leadership, you've seen that sense of unity and support. I think every confrontation starts because of Jerusalem, and every peace starts, and the Palestinian people they might be soft in every regard, but when it comes to Jerusalem, that line of defense is absolutely solid. Very solid. We are not doing enough collectively, nationally as Palestinians. We need to do much more. But believe you me, something we can announce and stuff that we cannot announce. Much is being done, and we need to do much more to help our people in Jerusalem, our brothers and sisters, to withstand that sheer pressure coming their way. The third line of defense is the Arab world, our region. And you know, with all the zigzagging and with all some of the issues, with all the particular moment in the Arab world now, Jerusalem remains to be a very significant aspect of the region, and therefore there is support, much more desired. But that's a major line of defense that we need to work on. The last is the international community. And you know, many would say that the international community is not doing as much as it should. But at least the legal side of the international community is clear. There was a UN Security Council resolution only a few months ago, in December, 2334, that directly declared East Jerusalem to be an occupied city. And that's the Security Council. It's not any other entity. This is the highest international legal and political council. The US abstained, but the US abstention was, in a way, a positive indicator that they are part of the international consensus about East Jerusalem and the illegality of the occupation and colonization in East Jerusalem. But in these four defenses, we know we must do much more. Let me end much more. And I believe you me, the July events around the Haram Sharif, and that method of resistance, and that moment of unity, and that moment of victory, even small, has been a major inspiration and indicator of where the future is heading. What we Palestinians are going to be doing in the future to defend our own rights. The last point is about Jerusalem/peace and the peace process and all the attempts. Without going into details, I just want to tell you one thing. Those who want to see peace in the Middle East must realize that East Jerusalem will always be the Palestinian capital. There will not be a peace agreement. There will not be a final agreement without East Jerusalem, all of East Jerusalem, the capital of the state of Palestine. And I'm not saying this by the way of rhetoric. They have tried it several times. By the way, the one issue that has brought all previous attempts to halt was Jerusalem. Wasn't any other issue. It was Jerusalem. Camp David and the late President Yasser Arafat, and even some attempts in the more near future with President Abbas. But here is the deal. Here is the deal. Jerusalem East is our capital. And hopefully there will come a time when peace will prevail and Jerusalem will be our capital. But we want it open. We want Jerusalem to be our capital, the center of our national gravity, the hub of our nation. But we want it, as the bishop said, a city for all people, a city for all faith. We promise you, Jerusalem, once it's under our sovereignty, will go back to where it used to be. And it must be. We will restore it as the city of all faith, for the faith of the Muslims, the Christians, and the Jews. And the Jews. We will restore it as the city of God and the city of peace, and the city that really accommodates everybody, the city that everybody sees his or her center of gravity and connection to the spiritual or to the religious connotations of it. So we must draw a distinction between issues of national and sovereignty, and between Jerusalem being open in that regard. With that, I end. Thank you.
Our next panelist is Professor Khalil Jahshan. Professor Jahshan, born in Nazareth, is a Palestinian-American activist and media commentator. He currently serves as the Executive Director of Arab Center, Washington, D.C., a non-profit think tank focusing on U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. From 2004 to 2013, Mr. Jahshan was a lecturer in international studies and languages at Pepperdine University and executive director of its Seaver College, Washington, D.C. internship program. He received a bachelor's degree in political science and French from Harding University in 1972. Professor Jahshan.
Thank you very much. You can clap, it's all right. just kidding, that's all right. I would like to add my gratitude to that of the ambassador to HCEF for convening this event again. This is what, how many years, Ratib? 19 years. 19 years, wow. Good job. And I'm delighted to be part of, again, of this year's program, particularly this panel with my two favorite Dr. Z's. I feel like changing my name to Zhivago or something so that there will be harmony, all three Z's. And I not only grateful to HCEF for the great work they have been doing over the years, but mostly to me, the commitment that they have shown over the years to working with churches over the issue of the survival, if you will, and the fate of Christianity in the region. As a person of Christian background, it means a lot to me, all the work that has been done by so many denominations affiliated with HCEF, and also with the members, you people, the supporters who have made all this possible in supporting the leadership of HCEF. On June 5th this year, the world marked the 50th anniversary of the 1967 occupation of by Israel of Palestinian territories, namely the West Bank, Gaza, and Jerusalem, and in a way kind of united the rest of Palestine with those of us who came under Israeli control in 1948 and grew up, and I see a couple, at least several people here in the audience with my experience of having grown up under Israeli rule since 1948. In addition to that, next week, actually on Thursday, November 2nd, as you know, we commemorate the 100th anniversary of the Balfour Declaration. These are historically two very important dates. In the sense, not only they're the only two dates in history, the modern history of the Middle East, but they are two kind of seminal and very influential events that really impacted the modern history of the region in no uncertain terms. The 1967 occupation, as most of you remember, initially was portrayed as a temporary measure by Israeli leader and tried to give the impression that this is, for all practical purposes, is a temporary things that would last for a few minutes and as my friend Ambassador Mack would remember from his diplomatic days, that Moshe Dayan became famous for his statement during that famous or infamous interview on BBC when he said that I'm waiting for the phone call. In other words, waiting for the phone call from Arab leaders to kind of call and surrender or whatever, except de facto that Israel is there. But he was implying that then we can talk peace. Needless to say, the phone never rang for clear reasons. It wasn't a fair situation. Dayan is no longer with us, but Israel's military occupation remains as pervasive today and as deeply entrenched as ever, to the detriment, by the way, of Arab, Israeli, and American interests, not only Arab interests or Palestinian interests. Realistic expectation of just peacemaking today has become virtually an expression of utter naivete and total disregard for the facts on the ground. They have made so many changes on the ground, it's almost naive to really even believe in a political solution anymore. The situation in Palestine as we speak today, ladies and gentlemen, is quite dismal. Most experts agree that the economic, humanitarian, political, and security situation in occupied Palestine is beyond untenable. The protracted dehumanization, internal colonization, and dispossession of the Palestinian people, as we heard from Ambassador Hussam, cannot and should not, morally speaking, be tolerated indefinitely. This is not stemming from purely Palestinian analysis or wishful thinking on my part or the part of my colleagues as Palestinian Arab Americans. It's actually the same conclusion that some Israelis, many Israelis as a matter of fact, with a clear conscience have concluded. There aren't many of them, and these days they are not as vocal, but let me just mention one. Former Mossad chief Tamir Pardo, who is no peacenik by any stretch of the imagination. He's killed quite a few Arabs and quite a few Palestinians throughout his career, but he declared on March 21, 2017, earlier this year, he said, Israel, and I'm quoting him, has chosen not to choose, hoping the conflict will resolve itself. Perhaps the Arabs will disappear. Maybe some cosmic miracle will happen. One day, or we will become a binational state, because it will be impossible to untie the Gordian knot between the two peoples. This is not the way to decide. He continued in that interview in Haaretz, saying, Israel has one existential threat. It is a ticking bomb. We have chosen to stick our head in the sand, creating a variety of external threats, end of quote. He concluded his interview by saying, Israel must deal with the demographic reality and decide which state we want to be. Life with alternative facts, which has become a new reality these days for us here. Life with alternative facts harbors a disaster for the Zionist vision. Okay? And so, who's to blame is my next question. Frankly, I'm not into the blame game, because when you live a conflict, being born in 1948, right in the middle of the mess, and having studied it all my life, I can tell you I'm not interested necessarily in allocating blame here or there. But let me, objectively speaking, spread the blame around. I think definitely Israel has some part, a major part of the blame, in the sense that it's, I believe, its intransigence since its establishment in May of '48, and particularly its insatiable appetite for land, specifically other people's land, namely our land, Palestinian land, whether in '48 or '67 or whenever. The date doesn't matter. It's the fact that most of Palestine today has been confiscated and colonized to the detriment, if you will, of the feelings and of the aspirations of a whole people, requires Israel to assume some blame for this problem. Second, Palestine. We Palestinians have also a share in that blame, in the sense, as the ambassador hinted to his credit a little while ago, our political weakness, not doing enough, if you will, our political weakness and the lack of an achievable looking vision, if you will, collective vision, and political will to end the occupation. That little passivity has also contributed to the duration and making the conflict protracted. The Arab world, again, plenty of blame, preoccupation of the Arab world with, particularly at this stage, frankly, with internal narrow interest and collective resignation from the Palestine question, has also earned some of the blame. We just revealed yesterday at the Arab Center our latest public opinion survey in the Arab world. We surveyed 3,400 Arabs in 8 countries throughout the Arab world. What stunned me, I anticipated that there will be a little bit of a decline in support for Palestine in the Arab world. What stunned me is the high rate of young people under the age of 24, that the issue of Palestine is no longer a top issue for them because of the distraction, because of what they are hearing from their government, because of the new enemies, real or fictional, that have been created for them by their own governments. There is a distortion for the current young generation in the Arab world. And that is dangerous because people under 25 in the Arab world, as you well know, are 65% of the 380 million Arabs that exist today. So they're the majority. And if the majority is distorted and confused, we are in deep trouble. The world community, its neglect, it's kind of leaving its responsibilities unfulfilled, whether at the UN or in any other place, also has created, I think, some problems for this issue and prevented it from reaching a conclusion. And of course, I left last is the United States specifically. We are part of the world community, but frankly, our role in this conflict has not been a typical role of just a superpower even. More than that, we have been a partner in the Arab-Israeli conflict. And that's why we have been having difficulty being part of the solution, because we have become very deep as basically an owner of the problem. So as we all know, the U.S. has been dabbling, by the way, with resolving the Palestine question since 1937. You might find that intriguing. I always point out, as a student of history, that we began to toy with solving the Arab-Israeli conflict 11 years before it started. Okay, 1948, typically we say, is the year Israel was created, and the beginning of the Palestine problem, or the Arab-Israeli. 1937, 11 years before that, we tried to settle, because we saw, the world community saw a problem in the making. Something is happening, something is coming to destabilize not only the region, but the world community. So Washington, throughout that period, has been involved in this national sport called Middle East or Arab-Israeli peacemaking since 1948. You know, Truman started, and every president since has dabbled with some attempt to solve this issue because of its negative impact on U.S. national interests, not necessarily for love of Israelis or for love of Palestinians or Arabs in general, but because of its impact on U.S. security and national security issues. So in practical terms, the American contribution, I think when you look at this huge cemetery of peace proposals, particularly when the majority of them, or at least the plurality of them, to be precise, have been American-made proposals. When you look at this cemetery, which is larger than any cemetery, Christian, Muslim, or Jewish, in Jerusalem, and you have, it forces you to think, why? Why this huge failure of, at least last time I counted, something like 79 attempts at peacemaking since 1937? For God's sake, why this massive failure? And of course there are, you know, a lot of, we can sit here for 2 more lectures talking about that, but to jump to the current situation, we have an administration right now threatening to do the same, like every other administration. And they have what I've been calling lately the Trump-Kushner-Greenblatt effort right now. I wouldn't call it a plan because it hasn't really matured enough to become a plan, to try to mediate in the region. So as you are, you know, all aware, President Trump, a few weeks after he was inaugurated, started sending his team to the region, Kushner, Greenblatt, and company. Sounds like a legal firm he brought from New York with him. But at any rate, started sending them to the region to meet with leaders there, and they have made quite a few trips. Refresh my memory, how many times has Greenblatt met with President Abbas?
Many.
Many, more than 20, I think, okay? So all they have been doing thus far is exploring the possibility. How can you bring the two sides, the two parties together? So here, you know, there we have the White House Crown Prince, Kushner, the Energizer Bunny, Greenblatt, both lacking totally. I wouldn't embarrass you, Ambassador Mack, to ask you to verify that, but lacking in diplomatic experience and expertise. And, but they have made all these trips to the region, you know, trying to see if there is any seriousness on the part of the party. But all they have conveyed thus far is one thing. Our president, our new president, Mr. Trump, is serious, and he's equipped, and he wants us to solve this problem. How? I mean, what are you bringing to the game, you know? I mean, some of us have been at this for a long time. And frankly, Mr. Trump is like Elizabeth Taylor's 8th husband. You have to ask him, what can you bring to the game? Is there anything new you're bringing into this relationship? So we need to know.
Deal of the century.
Yes, that's right, the deal of the century. Yet here we are, 9 months later, left in limbo without a definitive plan or any specific terms of reference beyond the good intentions of a president who never misses an opportunity to tell us and tell the whole world about his personal, unmatched negotiating skills and his commitment to solve this protracted conflict that many before him were not able to resolve. The parameters of this rumored Trump, they called it draft paper for a while, then they called it the ultimate deal for a while, and they keep changing the name, but the parameters or the content remain vague, if not totally unknown. I don't know if they know it, because if they knew it, it would have leaked by now. Okay? Everything leaks in this administration. We have no substantive leak as to the content of their plan. But we know the general parameters. Let me just go over them to kind of wake you up this afternoon.
You know the general parameters?
I know the general parameters. First, Trump wants all parties assured that he is seriously committed to the Arab-Israeli peace and will personally get involved at the right moment in the process. Well, thank you. Okay, we'll wait for that. 2, the administration, we are assured, is pursuing sustained security for Israel and a provisional entity for the Palestinians. I am sure there is no clear commitment from this president to the two-state solution, regardless of what sometimes he tells some Arab leaders, including some Palestinian leaders, but he is not, his administration is not committed to the long, historic stand of the U.S. government on a bipartisan basis in support of a two-state solution. He still can't come to that point. 3, the Palestinians have been repeatedly promised continued financial and technical support in return for full cooperation with Israel, ending incitement, maintaining counterterrorism efforts, and so on. And they have been asked to basically cease also the positive stuff that are happening on the Palestinians that the ambassador was frank enough to share with us a little bit, because some things we can't talk about, and we fully understand that. But all this international campaign that the Palestinians are waging for survival and to be honest to their people in terms of more international recognition, more involvement in international agencies and so on, President Trump wants us to stop that. Totally. He's not happy about Abu Mazen or Mr. Abbas continuing some of these efforts. 4th, the Trump efforts seem to pursue a phased and transitional approach rather than one that would basically end the conflict. It's not an end of conflict attempt this time, unlike previous administration, which means once things start rolling, then we have to come up with a time schedule that will be a multi-year time schedule. I'm not sure the situation in Palestine can withstand another 3 years, 6 years, 9 years, as we have done throughout the 90s. The administration has occasionally expressed general concern about continued Israeli settlements, but they still resist and refuse to call for a freeze on settlement. They keep talking to the other side, whining about it, but conflicting messages. When our ambassador in Jerusalem is the ultimate #1 American supporter of the settlement movement and keeps making statements contrary to U.S. policy vis-a-vis the settlements, that sends the wrong message. It is basically sending a green light, a permission to the most radical of the radicals in Israel to block the possibility of a Palestinian state. The 6th and most dangerous element is the fact that I think he combined, although that was an Arab demand at one point. I mean, frankly, the basic idea for a peace process right now is an Arab idea. It's not an American idea, nor is it an Israeli idea. It's the Arab Peace Initiative. So he's taking the Arab Peace Initiative and reversing its purpose. Basically, he wants to use it to replace the Palestine issue as the core of the Arab-Israeli conflict. Because Israel is not going to come to the table to talk about Palestine. He wants to bring him to the table to talk about relations with Arab countries. And unfortunately, with this dismal situation in the Arab world, there are 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, I don't know, because the number changes every day, countries that are obliging. And of course, this is contrary to the sentiment of the Arab masses. The survey we just released, number 1 issue on the mind of Arabs, more than 70% in the Arab world, is Palestine. Number 1 issue. That hasn't changed. It has diminished here and there within certain groups or certain strata of society, but it is still the overwhelming, most popular objective on the part of Arabs everywhere, in Saudi Arabia, in the Emirates, in Qatar, in Palestine, name it. Of course, Palestine, I think, was 96%, something like that. So that was good. Why all this failure? I think, look, I spoke too long already, but let me just say a couple of things. Ladies and gentlemen, some of you have gray hair like I do, and we've been around for a while. We have seen this movie before.
Some don't have hair.
Some don't have hair at all. We have seen this movie before, okay? So we're not willing to play the game all over again, from ground zero and waste time. There has to be some serious movement. I think in the past, this administration doesn't seem, first of all, to know the history of peacemaking in the Middle East. 2, doesn't seem willing to learn from the mistakes of the past. I can bring you, over the years I've worked with many American diplomats who have worked in this field, peacemaking in the Middle East, and there is a conventional wisdom out there. He is not willing to listen to them. He's not listening to his State Department. He's not willing to even staff his State Department in that department. He's not willing to allow the State Department to man or fill the team that is needed to pursue a serious peace effort in the region. You can't have 2 inexperienced men with 6 staffers at the White House do that. You have to have a team. We have seen peace processes in the past. There's a whole kind of mechanism that you have to kind of follow and proceed with. So the lack of even-handedness, the continued bias toward Israel, the vague objectives, the open-ended and protracted nature of American peacekeeping, no deadlines, no clarity, allowing Israel every time the prime minister in Israel says no, boo, we jump, we lower the ceiling again, say, okay, what's acceptable? Enough is enough. The U.S. needs, based on its own history, based on its own experience, okay, needs to put forward some ideas based on that experience. We all know what it takes to solve the Palestine question. The question is the political will and is the moral will available today at the White House? A couple of words on Jerusalem, and I'll stop. I'm the first person to admit to you that the issue of Jerusalem is a very complicated one and a very difficult one. But I am totally against the usual conclusion in this town that because it's complicated, we have to delay it forever till the end of the process. I don't think so. I think Jerusalem is a deal maker or deal breaker. It's either on the agenda or it is not on the agenda. If it's on the agenda, you have a Palestinian partner. If it's not on the agenda, it's not on the table, as we just heard repeatedly from many people in the Israeli government, then I think basically that's a non-starter. There will be no negotiating process. To summarize, I would say, ladies and gentlemen, there is no peace in the Middle East without Palestine. We have learned that over the years, okay? There's been, like I said, 78, 79 attempts at peacemaking. That is clear. But there is no Palestine without Jerusalem. It can't be. Nobody will accept it. It won't be legitimate. This may be frustrating for some of you to hear. It is not basically being tough on my part or on the part of Palestinian Authority or the PLO. It's just a fact of life that we learned the hard way from previous negotiations. It's frustrating, of course, I understand that. But you know, Jerusalem historically has frustrated a lot of people. Let me just quote some, at the risk of you think I'm quoting anti-Semitism, but I'll tell you the source in a minute. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who killed the prophets and stoned those sent to you, How often I have longed to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing. The Gospel of Matthew, chapter 23, verse 27. Thank you.
Our third panelist is Dr. James Zogby, who co-founded the Arab American Institute in 1985 and continues to serve as its president. He is a member of the executive committee of the Democratic National Committee and was appointed by President Barack Obama to the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom in 2013. In addition to writing a weekly column published in 16 countries, Dr. Zogby is the creator and host of the award-winning call-in political television show Viewpoint, and is frequently featured on national and international media as an expert on Middle Eastern affairs. In 2010, Dr. Zogby published the highly acclaimed book, Arab Voices. His 2013 ebook, Looking at Iran, The Rise and Fall of Iran in Arab Public Opinion, is drawn from his extensive polling across the Middle East with Zogby Research Services. Mr. and Dr. Zogby, please give us your thoughts and reflections.
Both of us?
Take turns.
Take turns. First comes Mr. No, I remember speaking here last year and talking about the work at HCEF, the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. And we made a go of it last year. We had a run at the commission. We had commissioned a study on the ways that Israel violates the religious freedoms of Christians and Muslims and non-Orthodox Jews. And the study is still available. It was done by a group of young lawyers in the West Bank who did an extraordinary job for us. We had a statement that was endorsed by 36 church groups in the region and at least as many church groups here in the States. We put them on a spot, but they refused to consider it. The numbers just weren't with us. Then they won't be with us because we continue to have at the commission, I'm no longer, I shouldn't use we, they continue to have a majority of folks who will not deal with it. But nevertheless, I think it's an important issue to continue to raise. And so if you follow me on Twitter, I mean, every time Pence is going to Jerusalem to talk on persecution of Christians, he announced that he's going at the end of the month. I know he will not talk about Christians in the Holy Land. He'll talk about Christians everywhere else, and probably Tennessee, and gay marriage. I mean, that's the focus of this crowd. But it's important that we continue to raise it, and I encourage you to do so. I'm not giving up, and I hope you don't. I was thinking while you were talking about the religious dimension of this continues to there are those who will deny that there's a discriminatory aspect to Israel's treatment. And I remember in 1978 when I was just here in Washington, I'd founded the Palestine Human Rights Campaign, and we invited a priest from the Galilee to come, and we were hosting a luncheon for him, a breakfast for him rather, with religious news reporters from Washington. After he finished making his opening remarks, the reporter from the Associated Press said, "You're an Arab and a Christian. Is that hard to balance that?" And he said, and follow up, exactly when did your family convert? And he said, he said it was probably about 2,000 years ago. And he said, but I guess if we had known back then that we would, by the act of converting, disinherit ourselves, we might not have. And so, with all due disrespect, my solution is an easy one. Y'all just convert. become Jews and go back. It's open season, right? And now there are those who will say that's an anti-Semitic comment. It is not. It is an acknowledgement of the fact that a discriminatory regime is in place that makes those who are not Jews a second-class group of citizens, if they're citizens at all, or simply non-people if they live under occupation. And that's something we have to acknowledge right from the get-go, which is the challenge we pose to the Commission, and it's the challenge that remains. Are Christians and Muslims real people, or are they not? Are they entitled to the full respect of human rights or not? And that's something I think that has to be addressed. Now, I have to say, actually, the Liz Taylor expression is, the story is, the eighth husband is saying, I know what to do, I just need to know how to make it interesting. But after your two talks...
your English is getting twisted.
That's the expression. He may have been twisted out of nervousness, but that was the expression. You pretty much said what I wanted to say about Jerusalem. I was speaking.
I'm sorry.
I'd actually no.
That makes me so.
It makes it possible for me to now do something else. I had written a chapter for the book y'all are doing on the earthly Jerusalem, and it was Faisal Husseini who taught me that it was the metropole.
We have the same teacher.
Right. And so that issue of it as the hub, I always think of Washington, D.C., and if you took the Beltway and said, this is now greater Washington, D.C., and put a wall and nobody could come in and establish closer and checkpoints, what happens to the communities outside? Where do they get their services? Where do they get their jobs? Where do they get their ability to function as a human society? And then what happens to the distorted development? I mean, Ramallah today, all due respect to people from Ramallah, is a distorted community. It should not look as it does, but it is.
We have 3-4 of them here. So they look distorted, but
no,
I'm not so sure.
No, you know what I mean. It's that the property values and the congestion, all of this is only the result of the fact that the hub has been severed. And so things had to move out, just like in Al-Khalil. I mean, you take away the market, and the market's got to go somewhere. And so it distorts the normal development of a city. And that's happened. All that said, I do want to make a couple of comments, though, about where we are. Because this is not a statement of resignation or surrender, or of being sort of pessimistic. I wouldn't be pessimistic. I wouldn't be doing what I do and be pessimistic. It is an effort at injecting a note of realism in this. A peace process is not possible. A two-state solution is not possible. And it's not it's not possible physically at this point, and we have to acknowledge that, I think, nor is it possible politically. Let me take the first. We witnessed in the last couple of weeks in Israel the newly elected leader of the Labor Party making statements that sounded more like Netanyahu than, or even Bennett, than they did like Perez, who wasn't the greatest thing since sliced bread either. And the question is, can you construct, and this has been an issue now for more than 20 years, it's almost for 30 years, can you construct a governing coalition in Israel that will make peace? In the end, you simply cannot. You can't get to 61. You can, in some cases, there have been ways you could configure it to 61 with an Arab component. That's what Rabin did. But Israel has become so increasingly divided on the issue of Arab politics, inclusion of Arab politics, that there's no peace group in Israel, no peace force in Israel that can come to 61 with Jews. And even if you add the Arab component, you're not going to get to 61 either. There is simply no no governing coalition possible in that regard. It's not just the numbers, it's the political attitudes that are the result, that create the conditions that produce those numbers. In all the polling we do in Israel, in all of the actions that you see being carried out in Israel, in all of the sort of jockeying for position in the right-wing coalition that currently governs, the issue is not can you move toward peace as much as it is how far to the right do you move, how far to getting awful do you go. When U.S. politicians say, I favor a two-state solution, for the most part they're trying to absolve themselves of having to deal with the issue. It's kind of the easy way of saying, I'm not going to do anything about it, but this is what I think. So let me off the hook here. I don't need to talk about it anymore. In Israel, when they say they support a two-state solution, it's an effort to keep Europe and some elements in America off their back. So Netanyahu will make the statement, two-state solution. He makes a statement that even Donald Trump isn't making right now. And so there is not only no commitment to it, there's no way to get a governing body that will do it. Why? Because to do it, you will have to undo the physical impediments that have been created to peace. Remember when the wall went up, I mean, just as the occupation itself was temporary, the wall was temporary. Oh, walls don't determine where the border will be. Oh, there's no one right now who will consider. Walls are, I don't know if you saw the at Arena Stage, they just had a play called Native Gardens. It's about two neighbors next to each other, and someone wants to build a fence 23 inches over into the other person's, what the other person has been acting as if it were their property, but it's not according to the deed. And a war breaks out between them. We have a wall that zigzags miles into the West Bank without a peep being raised by anyone, and certainly no one in Israel suggesting that it be moved. The physical nature of where the wall is and the development that has been both inside and outside the wall, what has happened in Jerusalem with 250 plus thousand, 270 or so thousand settlers inside what is called Jerusalem, but is in fact this huge swatch of land in the West Bank that was taken and annexed. They now want to annex more, adding another 150,000. I remember in the 90s standing on Jebel Hussein and looking out, and you could see before the wall this, what still was like a wall. It's the settlements, the way they ring up and down the hills and going around. They were closing it off then. It's now 3 times what it was at that point. I don't see getting there. On the Palestinian side as well, there are impediments, and we just finished a poll too, and ours is coming out on November 30th. I'm not one-upping you, but we did 8,000 in 9 countries. So we try to be able to have it so that we can get into the subgroups in each country. And the Palestinian numbers were distressing. 40+% do not believe peace is possible. 60% want unity, but 70% say they don't think it's going to happen. And I wish I could say to them, it will, but the impediments there too seem difficult to overcome. Does Israel want to see a political unity between the West Bank and Gaza? Do they want to see, even if Hamas were to agree to the terms that are being asked of, which I think are incredibly reasonable terms? I'm not sure it'll happen, and I'm not sure that Hamas politically is either smart enough or can separate itself from its blind. And I think, rather stupid ideology and past practice to be able to do what it ought to do. I remember arguing in 2006 when they won the election. They had the opportunity to govern, and they didn't. They chose instead to continue to be a militia, thinking that they could have it both ways, and they brought destruction on their own people. And in every single war that has followed, I find it incredibly tragic that at the end of the war they declare victory over the bodies of 1,000 or 2,000 people. That is not, we can't be that damn desperate that we consider that winning. I don't see any evidence that the leadership there understands their abject failure as a political movement. And while I could heap lots of blame on the Palestinian Authority, I understand the bind of having accepted Oslo, living under the conditions under which they live, which is a closure, where one of the largest sources of income is day labor jobs in Israel. I remember when I did Builders for Peace working with Vice President Gore in the 90s, we did not in any way imagine that the two single largest sources of wealth in the West Bank would be government jobs and day labor jobs in Israel or in the settlements. We were going to create an economy building on the private sector that was the dominant force in the West Bank, small but still dominant. Didn't happen. There were no economies of scale possible. Industry didn't develop. You couldn't import and export freely. And so you have basically a captive nation. And the stupidity of George Bush's 2003 speech, which people focused on because he said a Palestinian state, but what they didn't focus on was he said, you get your state after you become a democracy, ignoring the reality of the fact that you cannot become a functioning democracy as long as you live under occupation without a free economy, without free movement, without freedom to politically develop. And given the resentments that are going to develop, which lead to extremist currents, etc. So I'm not going to criticize those trying to manage a god-awful situation. When they've got tens of thousands of people depending upon them for a payroll, because that is the single largest source of wealth. To ask them to take actions that will threaten the viability of that situation is a difficult one. So for all of those reasons, I find politically and physically we're not looking good. Add to that the fact that the U.S. still holds the reins on this process. And our behavior has not been that of a facilitator of a peace process, but an enabler of really bad behavior. If you either have kids or, I'm sure not yours, but your neighbor's kids, and know what spoiled, rotten kids look like and how they become spoiled, rotten because people enable their bad behavior. Oh, you're feeling that. Oh, you threw that thing on the, oh, you shattered that. Let me get you another one right now. Don't get angry. Don't get angry. And this has created, I call it quite bluntly, a pathology. Israel has become pathological. They cannot control themselves. And so bad behavior becomes the norm and is expected. It's expected. And we absolve them of bad behavior and reward them, simply making the next round of bad behavior possible. And there's pathology on the Palestinian side too. I mean, on the one side, I call it the spoiled child syndrome, which is there are no sanctions for what you do, so you can do all the bad things in the world and you still get good things. We don't stop the money flowing. We don't stop the weapons flowing. We do everything we can to block any criticism in international circles, etc. On the Palestinian side, it's the opposite. It doesn't matter how good you are, you're still going to get punished. And so there's no reward for good behavior or no inducement for good behavior, and that creates the pathology of people saying, well, what the hell, I might as well do bad stuff because nobody's going to care. And no, it's the spoiled child and the abused child. And that pathology is playing out, and the U.S. is what enables it to occur. The behavior of Congress in just the last year, if the president were what comes from the White House in this administration and the last one, I had many arguments with President Obama over this issue. At his best, he was weak, and at his worst, he also enabled. And I remember finding it just too cute by half, the Cairo line about we question the legitimacy of continued settlement development, and in another phrase talking about adjusting to realities. So continuing building is not legitimate, but once it's built, it's a new reality, and we have to accommodate ourselves to it. I didn't miss it, and I'm sure nobody else did either, but that was kind of where we were. This situation is, I think, even worse for the reasons I think that Khalil pointed out. But Congress compounds the situation, and by creating new burdens, new hurdles, and more difficulties, more enabling behavior for Israel, and more burdens and difficulties for Palestinians. That being the case, I not only am not being pessimistic, I think I'm being realistic here. I'm not being defeated. I'm saying we need a new strategy in America, a new strategy in America that focuses on human rights, that focuses on humanizing and challenging people to recognize the full humanity of Palestinian people. That means telling the Palestinian narrative and making it real. Because as I've argued ever since I started the Palestine Human Rights Campaign, the problem in the U.S. is that when they think of the Middle East conflict, the equation that comes to mind is Israeli people versus the Palestine problem. And in that mindset, people always win. Palestinians remain an abstraction, at best.
And the problem?
At worst, they are terrorists. And a lot of work went into it. Going back to the film The Exodus, I mean, it was a huge propaganda coup that the Israelis made to create this cowboy and Indian scenario where the good guys were the blonde-haired, blue-eyed folks sort of paving their way in the frontier, confronted by these angry, brutal savages. That language, incidentally, goes back to the founders of the movement. I have a couple of articles this week and next week on Balfour. Balfour was not just a declaration, but it was the culmination of British imperial interests and its insensitivity toward indigenous people, and the racism that was inherent in the Zionist movement. Those two combined with a perfect, sort of a meeting of the minds. Max Nordau, one of the founders of the movement, said if Zionism hadn't existed, Britain would have invented it. And they sold themselves to the British as the civilizers in a barbarian world. They were going to become the outpost. That mindset still exists in America. People don't see Palestinian kids. They don't put a name on them. They don't know who they are. And therefore they cannot feel anguish for what's happening in Khalil. They can't feel the strangulation of Jerusalem. They can't feel the oppression and the humiliation of going through a checkpoint. They just don't know those stories. And they don't know the people involved in those stories. And I just don't think we make change until we do. What change we make? Do we end up confronting an apartheid regime and demanding equal rights? Do we end up with mobilizations that take us in front of Israeli embassies and sit-in strikes and whatever? Does it mean that we ultimately win a decisive number of people to our side and defeat some members of Congress who continue to be arrogant and stupid on this question? I don't know. But what I do know is that change will not come until we've humanized Palestinians and altered the mental equation that exists in the U.S. Because when you look at the litany of things that are happening, They're so god-awful, and we say, why aren't people reacting to this? It's because they don't feel the humanity of the people involved in it. And so I for one, Hussam, can't do the politics of this right now, because we need to do the meta-politics, the pre-politics, the politics of reaffirming that this is a situation that involves real people, real lives, and real suffering. And people have to know every one of these folks. When we started the Palestinian Human Rights Campaign, we adopted cases. And our purpose in adopting the cases was to do what Amnesty International did, to put a face. So that people looked at that face, Sami Ismail, and said, oh man, that's terrible. Or they looked at that family sitting around a home that had just been demolished and said, that's terrible, I'm going to write a letter about that. Or they got to know Mohammed Milham and Fahad Qawasbi and Hamdan Nasser and said, these are really good people. I believe their story. We need more Palestinians to be known as victims. This is not victimology. This is politics. People need to know the victim as real. And so that's where I'm at right now. Sorry, I think I might have gone too long, but thank you.
Thank you all very much. We'll entertain some questions, and I will go in this fashion. I want to ask Shahir, because his train will leave in half an hour, so he has to ask the first question, and Godspeed.
Thank you so much. And thank you, panelists, and I'm so delighted to listen to these interesting presentations. And I have one comment that I like to make regarding the strategies presented by His Excellency Ambassador Hussam. And I will focus only on one, that the 4 defenses he mentioned, and I think only one would work at this time, given the presentations that we listened to. There is no much hope. So let's focus on what we have, which is the Palestinians in Jerusalem and the Palestinians at large. I was very fortunate to work with Faisal Husseini at the Orient House for 7 years. And the vision that he had, that to empower the Palestinians, help them even build one classroom at school, this is a great help. Empower them to expand one workshop in the city, this is a great thing. Don't wait for a resolution from the Security Council. If you were lucky, you will not get it within 2 decades, and if you get it, there is a highly likelihood that it will not be implemented. Just focus on what you have, empower your people, and expand their ability to resist. So I think that this is what we should all focus on. Before assuming my diplomatic post with the OIC, I was doing that job. And when I went to the post that I am in now, I felt that those who are around us, and we count on them, that are not Palestinians, believe me, you can't count much on them. So let's count on what we have, count on our own people, and we will make it, inshallah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Excuse me. مع السلامة يا شيخ.
Yeah, good luck.
تحكيني ها؟
Yeah, sure.
سلامات.
Hello. Thank you all so much for an excellent panel. This question, I think, is mostly directed to you, Dr. Zogby. You mentioned we need to humanize the faces and the lives of the Palestinian people. I quite agree. Do you see campuses across the United States as a good venue for presenting the human story?
Without a doubt. And when I say humanize, I mean even in spite of some, no, that was an effort of a joke.
I laughed.
Okay. No, nobody else did. I had to spell it out.
Because I've known you for a long time. So it's not.
Absolutely. And in polling we do, there's not just a partisan split on the issue, there's a demographic split. With young people, and African Americans and Latinos and Asians being on one side of the ledger, and other folks on the other side of the ledger. Young people, God bless you. Yeah, it's basically the same split as what defines the partisans: professional, educated women, young people, and the three major minority communities, and then middle-aged old white guys on the other side, the born-again crowd in particular. Campuses are a really important venue, I think, and we're finding that clearly with the BDS movement, which I think has become quite successful and pronounced in its ability to impact campus politics. There are two issues that I want to, as a concern though, that are sort of tangential to this. The one is that on the left, as on the right, there is a disturbing new kind of intolerance that has taken hold, which I find problematic. And I think we're all experiencing it, and somehow if old folks have any role to play, it's don't go there. I mean, it's don't, you don't need to shout down or ban. You don't need to become totalitarian in behavior on the left to win the case. And so that's one. And the other is that the new Assistant Secretary of Education, the nominee, is from the Brandeis Center on Anti-Semitism. And he has been, I debated him a couple of years ago in a debate that Ralph Nader put together. It was he and I going at it on this issue of anti-Semitism being, anti-Israel being anti-Semitism. And he wants Jewish students included in the civil rights protections against discrimination, but he wants them included not because of the faith of Judaism, but because of Israel. And that's how he defines it. And if you look at the Brandeis Center annual report, which I have done, and go through the 400 cases that they outline in the book, you will see that testimony from one young woman saying, well, I had a professor in Arab world history who was very pro-Nasser, and I used to leave class every day really uncomfortable. It made me so uncomfortable that I needed counseling, and that's recorded as an anti-Semitic behavior. And there's others like that. Most of them are like that. There are a few instances where behavior became unacceptable and clearly discriminatory, but that was an absolute handful out of the 400, maybe 8 or 9 of them. And I read through the whole damn thing. It's a problem, and they're going to try to legislate this in Congress, but they're also trying to implement it through interpretation of the Civil Rights Act article, the article that applies to civil rights protections on campuses, and so I'm fearing that. At the same time, this issue of behavior of some of the students on the left as well as on the right, intolerance toward differences of opinion, is an issue we need to work with.
Mr. Chairman, may I just add a couple words? I agree with Jim totally with regards to the importance of the campuses around the country, and in terms of the next phase of activity on the part of the pro-Palestinian community in this country. However, I think it's not enough to just work on campuses. It's very important, even though it's more promising right now, but that's not gonna, first of all, it's gonna last a long time before that generation that are juniors and seniors take charge of society. And I'm not willing to wait 30 years before some kind of progress is made on policy. So other strata of society, other venues need to be pursued. I hope we, quote unquote, the community of support for the Palestinians are sophisticated enough to chew gum and walk at the same time and be able, even though some of the other areas are less promising, and at this time, and less successful. Because we've done the opposite before. We've worked at the national level. Both of us spent a whole career doing that, and we ignored the grassroots. We ignored, in a way, campuses. The second point is the issue is very important that Jim brought up. The quality of the exchanges taking place on campus it's getting. Unfortunately I don't remember the professor, but some professor wrote an op-ed piece in one of the major papers this morning, basically saying why I'm having a hard time accepting debates on campuses. He's referring to the violence and to the inability to cope with the other side, to be able to cope with differences. It's not enough to agitate and convince our young people, regardless of what their background, to get involved and be vocal on campus, but they need guidance. They need guidance. And unfortunately, the link between the experience of our generation and the current generation has not been made. They're not benefiting from, let's say, the experience we've had, and we haven't been able to convey that. We failed to convey that experience. There are no things like General Union of Palestinian Students or General Union of Arab Students or a progressive to kind of convey that at this time, so it's going to be difficult. But there has to be some outfit. If there is a national campaign of some sort, it has to have a campus component, definitely, but it has to have some other components. But the campus component needs to be as organized as the other side. I mean, the support that their students get from so many different sources, from so many different organizations. And yet they're still whining about we have the upper hand on campuses, that we have defeated them totally. I mean, you know, they see some of you guys that have been so active around the country, and they declare, hey, you know, we are not getting our share of events on campus or the caliber of speakers we get on campus and so on. So there has to be some coordinative body geared just for students, and I wish there was a mechanism today to do that, and I think it's a failure on the part of our community that we have ignored it for too long.
Ratib.
Yes, I guess, Khalil, you are right. You know, I just came back from Utah, and I was at two universities, and they are looking for BYU and Utah University, and both, they were looking for somebody to organize them and to help them out. But this is not, this is my comment, you know, how we can organize, you know, these young people in the universities. But I want to ask His Excellency, because he's not the old school like you guys. He's like me, you know, just young people, you know, trying to do something, you know, around here, you know.
Thank you.
You know, this is what you said, Khalil. I didn't bring it, you know. And I want to make sure that, you know, how you see as a fresh blood coming to the United States. We've been looking at the United States when you were students, when you were in England, and you came here, and now you have maybe the power to do something, or you have an agenda, how we can see things changed here, how we can be helped, as you have supporters for Palestine, we have leaders, old ones and young ones, you know, I mean, you know, let's consider ourselves as the young ones. How we can hear from you, your vision for how you like to see that we are supporting Palestine.
Thank you, Ratib. First, by what you have done today and what you have been doing for all these years, bringing the issue of Palestine, the issue of Jerusalem, all the major issues squarely on the table in Washington, because keeping the discussion is crucial. And believe you me, as much as politics that my friends Khalil and Jim hinted towards, policy is crucial. And you know, there are so many think tanks in this part of the world that represent and presents the Israeli side of the story, but there is a very few. One of them is your work and the Jerusalem Center as a place that always keep the Palestinian policy side of the story on the scale. Policy is crucial. And believe you me, all the subsequent outcome of the Oslo resulted from policy papers that were written in the early 90s, right? By the so-called peace industry and the mediators. Without going into names now, I already got myself into troubles. Nonetheless, as Khalil said, walking and chewing gum, I don't know what he meant, which is which. But if walking means that you really have to have your eyes fixated on the long term, then what Jim said is crucial. We have got to rebrand ourselves. we have got to start the journey of really disassociating ourselves from the stuff that our opponents have associated us with which is violence, terrorism, incitement. We teach our kids how to hate. And this is nothing further from the truth. So our task of actually rebranding is very easy. I mean, if there is one nation that is a model of diversity and tolerance, it is us, the Palestinian people, throughout the history, by the way, particularly today. And given what is happening in the region, we could stand tall and tell our stories. I always say wherever I go that, you know, a society that has been able to keep the keys of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre with a Muslim family for all these hundreds of years, because Christians of Jerusalem trust their Muslim brothers and sisters more than they trust themselves, is a story that needs to be told.
It's just the Greek archbishop that bothers me.
It's a story to be told. That Muslims of Bethlehem and Palestine worship the Church of Nativity as much as Christians is a story to be told. There are so many stories to be told, Jim. I agree with you. A society under all that still capable to produce almost zero illiteracy rate. Zero, almost, illiteracy rate. And one of the highest per capita PhD graduates in the world. Some told me in 1997 we were the highest country as per the UNESCO calculations. Is a society that has a story to be told, to be humanized, absolutely, and to associate yourself with who we are, truly who we are. When now in America we demand the two-state solution. Hell no, we don't demand the two-state solution. We have made a concession and accepted the American/international request from us to enter the club of nations. That's why I said East Jerusalem is not a demand, it's a concession. We have our homes in West Jerusalem and we have the paperwork for it. But we conceded West Jerusalem for the sake of aligning ourselves with the so-called international legitimacy. So that side, the narrative is crucial, and I'm happy to tell you the first decision we made in that small office of ours, the PLO General Delegation, was to start that battle. We now have, some of them are here, a team dedicated for social media. Now, as we speak, I'm seeing my Twitter here, they tweeted 20 times. They are really going the youthful way and understanding the new language. We do not talk about our resentment to Israel, and we have resentment. It's our right to resent illegality. It's our natural behavior to dislike occupation. But we talk more of our love to Palestine. And this is something we, the Palestinians, missed over the years. We missed really talking about our attachment to our land, the beauty of our land, the beauty of our nation. Ya Ammi, Israel is, keep it there, keep it there. So Jim is absolutely right in the need to really keep the ethos, the basis of our narrative, because it is one narrative, you can't change it, but brand it in a way that the American people understand it and the rest of the world understand it. I tell you, Jim, you have a partner in us in this journey. We've just started. But this is not enough, as Khalil said. It's not enough. You have to chew the gum. You must chew the gum, if you meant by chewing the gum is dealing with the politics of America. And for that matter, you must create an agency. Palestinians are not just victims. We are not just victims. We are doctors, we are professors. We have built everywhere we went. And we are stories of success and love and what have you. We are not just victims. And that chewing of gum, that political work, that agency needs to have some organization. The first is our community in the United States of America. That's your major army. It's disconnected. It's fragmented. It's not united. It does not have one political channel. All that. But I'll tell you, we must invest most in it. Second, you, the civil society, the array of solidarity groups, the many civil institutions. You're talking about hundreds in the campuses and in major cities around the U.S. This is our natural allies. On the 15th of November, we decided to celebrate that day, Declaration of Independence, and declaring it a day of peace, because our independence was such a concession for peace, with the Students for Justice for Palestine, SJP, and with all the students, because that is the future. The future, no, Khalil, I am willing to wait 30 years if we invest in the right direction. And it's not going to be 30 years. I mean, people can be leaders in their 40s, so you may wait 10 years, 15 years. But we have got to be strategic, because I have to say, Exodus and all that happened in the last 5 years make it almost not a very good investment to waste your time with their parents. It's almost fait accompli about their beliefs and their perceptions. We must invest in the youth. And I tell you, they are on fire. They are way more knowledgeable, way more brave. So, in a nutshell, it's crucial that we do all the tasks, but in the end, I have learned only in the last few weeks, few months, that America is not with us, but America is not against us. And in that, there is the opportunity. There is the big opportunity. And for that opportunity, and for all these cracks on the wall, we have got to organize. Washington is not about narrative only. I was told by a very, very senior senator, you think we don't know who's right and who's wrong? I want you to hear this, Jim, because this is not just about the narrative. This is not just about who is the victim and who's the victimizer. Almost all the senators and the congressmen know who is the victim and who's the victimizer. This is about the votes and the money and the power. This is about the agency and your ability to present yourself squarely in Washington. This is about your muscles. This is about your ability to name and shame. And this is about ability to reward. We don't. What do we factor now? Every congressman told me that, you know, I like you. We like the way you talk, all of you Palestinians. You present yourself in the best way. Successively, by the way, all through the years. But go talk to our constituencies. If the real decision-making in the Hill starts in our constituencies, back there in Chicago and in Pennsylvania and what have you. So, in one sentence, just to end this thought, I think this is a very opportune moment in America. I believe so. We have new methods, new tools like the social media. We have the youth. We have the changes among the Jewish community. I was a keynote speaker at the J Street conference only 3 days ago. There is a real change among the Jewish community. There is a change in the church and in the Christian community here. And you see that, and we discussed that. There is a change everywhere you turn. There are the minorities here of America that are seeing the link, the African Americans, the Hispanics. Things are changing. Look at all the opinion polls. I agree with Jim that the current political reality is ugly back home. But as far as America, I believe it's our moment here. And I'll end by saying why, for 3 reasons. The first reason is the Palestinian American, the new Palestinian American generation. Go meet them. Go meet them. Their fathers were all about survival, but these guys are not about survival. These guys are proud Americans and proud Palestinians. They are aggressive in the positive sense. The second is the new American generation. They are exposed thanks to this. They know, and you can reach them in a press robot. You don't need to pay $1 million for an ad for New York Times. Or what was his name, the media guru who used to own everything in the world, media-wise? Murdoch. Huh? Robert Murdoch. Yeah, you have to appease him, so you appear in the media. Now, you know, you are as good as anybody else. And thirdly, we are now engaged seriously in trying to renew our strategy, in having a new sort of, khalas, we have been victims of our own narrative and discourse for a long time. We need to set ourselves free, and I think this is a long journey that has to start at this point. I don't know if we'll be successful, but we have to chew the gum.
And walk.
And walk.
Okay. Yes, okay. Sir. 1 second. 1 second. Please. 1 second. Here. Because we are on.
Yeah. I just want to make a comment in response to the question about activism on campus. I'm a retired university professor, still maintain an emeritus title at the University of Florida. My recollection, I have a cousin at the University of Florida, a professor of hematology, oncology, and very, very, very nationalistic Palestinian national. And on the weekends, he used to always go to the streets with banners and to speak against the cruel occupation of Palestinian land, and et cetera, et cetera. And he was called by the dean of the School of Medicine to stop it. And he was basically not threatened, but basically was told to stop what he was doing. So there are consequences even at our universities, and I can speak from personal experience about that. So we have to be a little careful and to know what we need to do and to do it in the right way.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Ilyas back there in the corner.
Where is Elias?
He's hiding. You don't see him. He's out of your visual field.
I'm always hiding.
It's okay if somebody's before me. That's fine.
No, no.
You've got funnier questions than I do.
No, it's okay. So I'm not going to be funny.
My question is, it seems like we just discovered a 60-year-old or a 68-year-old or a 50-year-old, depending on the math, a plan by the Israeli government to change the center of gravity of Jerusalem to some other location like Ramallah, and the distortions of a distorted city. But my question is, what are we doing about it? What are we doing about shifting the attention or bringing back the center of gravity being to Jerusalem itself, one, and hence bringing the center of attention of the Arab world back to Palestine again? And that's one question. And the other question is, having been a student here in the United States for many years, activism on campuses has been going on for as long as I can remember. I was there, and there was a generation before me that was there as well. We never had the guidance from the leadership, and I agree with the panel here. But what can we do to reconnect? Because I think that's exactly where it is. And when I say the activism on campuses, I don't only mean the Arab community activism on campuses, I also mean the American activism on those very same campuses. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to make a couple of points. With regard to changing opinion, you mentioned the members of Congress who, I used to, the Pope, when he would name cardinals behind the Iron Curtain, he would name them in our heart. He would never release their names publicly for fear of persecution. I used to say back in the 80s that I have a club in my heart of members of Congress who are, I'm really with you guys, but I just can't. And that's not a new situation. We've always had silent supporters who would vote to stab us in the back because they were afraid, quote unquote, of what might happen. And part of that's our fault. I remember arguing with Paul Findlay when he wrote his book that he was simply helping them make the myth greater. I know in all the years I've been doing this, I know so many guys who've lost even though they tried to help them, and I know so many of our guys who won even though they tried to hurt them. I mean, Jim Moran stands as living witness to the fact that they can't do anything to you if you're strong in your district. And then they point to Cynthia McKinney, who incidentally had lost it, completely lost it. And everybody knew it. It was a secret for like a couple of years, but at some point she just had to go. And Hank Johnson, incidentally, is as good on the issue as she was. So they didn't get anything for the trade at all. They tried to defend Clarence Long up here in Maryland, got his butt kicked. They tried to defend Rudy Boschwitz when Paul Wellstone was challenging him. They couldn't do it. I mean, it's an even game, actually. Poor Paul Findlay lost, right? And everybody said, oh, they beat him. They didn't. He got redistricted from a Democratic district to a Republican district. It was 60% Democrat. It got redistricted to 60% Republican. I mean, the other way around, sorry. And he got beat. Chuck Percy raised more money than his opponent, Paul Simon. And when I met Chuck Percy right after that election, we were at a conference together in London. Question got asked of him, why'd you lose? And he pointed across the table. He said, your friend, meaning Jesse Jackson. Story. In all the years that Percy'd been in Congress, Mayor Daley in Chicago had run a ruthless political machine that was white against black, and when he looked for a statewide politician to run, they found a moderate Democrat from the southern part of the state that he thought would fit the bill to win. Chuck Percy was a moderate Republican who was better than the Democrat on civil rights issues. And so the black leadership in Chicago endorsed the Republican. Time and time again, they would endorse the Republican for Senate. Daley dies. Harold Washington becomes mayor, African-American leader, and finds a progressive Democrat in Chicago, Paul Simon, to run, and the blacks endorsed them. There's a wonderful book on black power and how the black vote in Chicago shifted from moderate Republican to liberal Democrat and won that race. That's why Chuck Percy lost, but it became more convenient for him to say later on in his career that the Jews beat me, right? And we all bought it and accepted it and helped play out the myth of their invincibility. They are not invincible. We need to deal them a blow. And I'm convinced of that. If we do not win an election and beat somebody, it's not going to happen. But we need a strategy to do that. That's number one. Number two, can change happen? And how does it happen? Look at gay marriage. I used to compare our numbers, attitude toward Arabs and Muslims with gays. There were some people in the community saying, don't do that. But the reality is that we are a partisan issue. 2/3 of Democrats think we're great. 2/3 of Republicans think we're awful. It was the same on gays. What happened? What happened? It was young people. Young people, parents would say, well, I think this is a disgrace. It's abominable behavior. It's terrible. Oh, son, you're gay? You know, or your best friends are gay? And then it began to shift. I don't think any issue in American history shifted as quickly as attitude toward acceptance of gays. Because everybody knew one. And everybody had a relationship with one, a friendship, or a son, or a daughter, something. And it began to shift. People don't know Palestinians. That's the problem. And it's not, we focused on we play right into their hands when we focus on the problem. And we come up with an abstract, well, Jerusalem is this, and, you know, they're doing this with the this and the this. They want to know Ahmed. They want to know Sausen. They want to see a face and put somebody on
Not
that.
Sausen, no. They don't want to know Sausen. It's dangerous.
Okay, they don't want to know her. Then they want to know. Okay, they don't want to know Khalil. I'll tell you that. Right?
Definitely not.
They want.
Not at this time of the day, anyway.
I remember Mitch Snyder, who was the big homeless advocate here in Washington. I did a fundraiser for him one time at my office, and he leaned over to me and he said, you know, your cause is like my cause. I said, what do you mean? He said, everybody knows there's homeless people. They just don't want to deal with it. And they don't know a homeless person in the face. They don't know their name. They don't feel them, so they just walk away and turn it away. Same thing, they know Palestinians are oppressed. They know that they're in the right, but they just don't know them as real people enough to want to be challenged to do something about it. That's our issue. I remember when what's his name, Carl Wagner passed away a little while ago. One of the great political operatives, worked for Teddy Kennedy. Homeless folks. Mitch went to him and said, "We want to get Congress past $200 million to build homeless shelters." This is during the Reagan era. And Carl said, "Let me think about it a little bit." So he came back to them a week later and said, "I got this idea." He called it Hands Across America. And we'd hold hands from Los Angeles to New York, and they'd connect clear across the country, and people would pay $15 each. And he figured the money out was some couple $1 million, a few million, more than a few million. They said, no, we need $200 million. He said, listen, just let me do it. He started the campaign on college campuses mainly. And by the time he was done, a couple months later, they had this thing going clear across America. Up to the White House, Reagan was so moved by it, he and Nancy joined hands and went through the White House gate and out the other side of the gate, and it continued on. And it raised something like $60-something million. 2 weeks later, Congress passes $400 million for homeless. Carl used to call it the ringing bell. You got to ring the bell and make them say, "Oh, wait, I need to do that. I need to know about that." We don't have a ringing bell on Palestine. We don't have a somebody doesn't go to bed saying, oh shit, that kid, I think I can't get my mind off that kid. Like the young Syrian refugee. I mean, I'm not looking here for like exploiting dead children, but we don't have a Palestinian story that we have elevated to the point where the entire Palestinian narrative comes through that one suffering child, that one suffering parent, that one agonizing family that has had to pay a price that no human family should have to pay. That's what we need to do. That will change the dynamic. The rest of it then becomes political organizing. Once the bell is rung and people say, pay attention, right? Then you can start to sort of mine the strain that you've exposed, and you can begin to pull people in. That's when you need the political strategy. And I took too long again, but sorry. Yes, please.
All right, good afternoon.
You promise not to be funny.
I promise I will not be funny. So my name is Amr Zahar. I'm a comedian and a professor. And I've been on college campuses for a very long, well, I went to, I was a student for 10 years, and then I've just, through virtue of my work, I do a lot of work on college campuses. The truth is, when I was in college in the mid-90s, we used to be 5 or 6 students, and we would go to like a Hillel event where they were bringing Dennis Ross or somebody like that, and we would sit in the audience, we'd wait till he was done talking, then we'd like raise, then we'd be counter-protesters, and we'd, And then I was at an event a couple years ago at the University of Michigan, and it was a Palestinian event, and there was 200 people there supporting us, and there was just like a group of students over here that looked like they didn't belong, and then it came time for them to ask questions. So they've become the counter-protesters. So that is something very positive that's happening. But I can tell you, as someone who probably wades into the Palestinian American community more than anybody else, and as somebody who is on college campuses a lot, the way that we've been able to move forward and get more people to show solidarity with us, and get more people to latch on to the Palestinian cause and make them the counter-protesters, has not been by talking about negotiations with Israel or talking about, it's been by, just like they did with gay marriage, or just like they might have done with homelessness, they treated those issues as, we shouldn't live like this anymore. These are illegitimate, homelessness is illegitimate. Opposition to gay marriage is illegitimate. It's not the way we want to be. We got to this point by saying that Zionism is illegitimate, that Israel is illegitimate, that this is how we got to the point that we got, same way that South Africans did their discourse, that apartheid is illegitimate. Never a discourse of how do you negotiate with your oppressor. So, why is it that a lot of academics, and especially unfortunately the Palestinian Authority and the PLO, keep pushing this idea that we should sit with these people? Because that is not how we have forwarded the discourse in America. We have not forwarded the discourse in America by saying, how do we negotiate with our oppressor? That's not what we've done. We forwarded the discourse in America by saying, we are oppressed, and that's illegitimate, and that Zionism is apartheid and racism, and Israel is a racist state. This is how we've gotten the message across. Why cannot the generation before us, let's say, and the political elite carry that same message which has been so successful among the masses and our community? Sorry, that was not funny.
No,
It was actually hilarious.
Can I take that? Do you want to answer?
When you said I was
Yeah.
in school for 10 years, I was going to say, now that's funny. No.
Go ahead. You raised a lot.
I know.
Very solid question and very important one, and it is a serious challenge, and it's not a new challenge. My 40 years in this line of work, we faced that issue in different versions at different times. I'll tell you what, I'm not trying to justify, but I would like to explain. Each one of us, and that's what's still lacking, each one of us has a different constituency and a different task to do. Collectively, we have one objective. Okay, but it doesn't mean that our agenda has to be 100% unified. The objectives have to be unified. Where we are, what we are shooting for. We want to go home, E.T. Okay, and but if I decide to work as a lobbyist in Washington D.C. and I work with Congress, I will last for 2 seconds if I adopt your agenda that you so effectively described and implemented on campuses. It's not going to work in Congress. It's not going to work.
Behind you if you adopt what I'm saying. See, what you guys are doing is you don't. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no,
But
it's
the way
fine.
that you guys are doing, and I'm saying you guys. I'm
Yeah, no, it's fine.
too much, okay? But the mode of business that I'm criticizing doesn't have the massive support of the community.
It doesn't.
Because that's not the way we've been operating. Sorry.
Right, but
So
then
the
then
Woodlands
the
law-
argument
I give money to somebody.
the argument from the elite is there is no community. Where is the community?
Well, no, but we're okay. Sorry, I won't.
Okay, no, it's fine. No, it's okay.
Well,
I mean,
but
we
we
need.
are succeeding on campuses, among our friends, among our
Okay.
communities, social media. But it's by delegitimizing Zionism and delegitimizing
Yeah.
Israel, not you give us this.
But
village,
that
we'll take
community,
village. That's not the way
to be honest with you, that if I were still, doing lobbying, that community doesn't benefit me on the Hill at all because that will even diminish my ability to influence people. Yesterday, I met with there is a new thing. Jim, you might not be surprised because I've been out of that line of work for a long time. I met with some grassroots new movement, if you will, among American Syrians. They were having their convention here yesterday. And I was surprised. It's a new group, mostly initiated by doctors in the medical profession, that split from the old mafia of Syrian doctors, who are, by the way, the largest medical subsection in our community. And because the old one was controlled by Syrian intelligence in the old days, and they still have their elite, they're still with the regime. This one is the dissidents. They are with the rebels. And I was surprised at the extent, how many members of Congress showed up last night? Okay, 22. Okay, one man from Indiana, a medical doctor, brought in 12 people, including his 2 senators from Indiana, who are not necessarily with us on all issues. As a matter of fact, they are not. But on this issue, they are.
Yeah, no, hating Bashar is easy.
Okay, but what I'm saying is you have,
I mean,
yeah,
it's, that's.
but it's also the product of a work at the grassroots. So I agree with you in terms of the importance of the grassroots. But every task we face, every challenge we face has its own grassroots. You know how much money they raised during the 16 elections? That small group of doctors? $3 million donated to the candidates for the president. Have we in the community ever raised $3 million? Rarely. Only we brought it from the outside. So that's
Stop.
okay.
Look, let me just.
Yeah. Just I don't understand something, and I got lost a little bit. What community are you talking about? The Palestinian community or the Arab community?
Well, I mean, look, for a cause like this, you're not going to distinguish. I mean, that's what harmed us. Historically,
they have their own agenda. Sometimes you don't want to be a political.
But you don't divorce the community. That's what harmed us as Palestinians, is the fact that during a certain period in history, starting with the Camp David stuff, 77, we began to separate from each other. The core of the Palestine cause in this country was Arab Americans, not Palestinian Americans. Okay? When the PLO led us in the wrong way and we went the wrong way, we paid a price. So we lost a lot of our Arab depth the way we as Palestinian people lost our Arab depth. And now you have this total resignation from the Arab-Israeli conflict by maybe 18 of the Arab countries. So it's a serious challenge for the leadership, but it's also a serious challenge for us as a community. So the splintering, plus the fact that during this period, a new dimension was created, which is the also Muslim American community, and the Arab component between the Muslim community and the Arab American community that got caught in limbo. So, but all I'm saying is some of that problem, not all of it, at least a small percentage, I would say, but venture and say 10 to 20% of it, would be healed and would take care of itself if we were a little bit more tolerant with each other, generational, political, which at one point we were a little bit more sophisticated. Now we are maximalist. Everything has to be black and white. If you are not with me on this one, you're out, you're useless. Your generation is, you're doing great job on campus. He's doing great job in Washington. He's doing great job in diplomacy. Now, what's missing Can we have this common objective so that we can contribute to that? We don't have to abide by either a common formula of one state, two states, three states, as long as what the objective is. Freedom for the Palestinians, statehood for the Palestinians, human rights for the Palestinians. I think that's the only way in a pluralistic society like ours, that we have to learn how to function together and tolerate each other and love each other seriously, regardless of the differences politically.
At the most, we have 5 minutes, so
Okay.
let's conclude, please.
Sure. Can I
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
you go first. Can I give my...
We just have one quick question.
Yeah. No, hold on. Let the ambassador go, then we'll have a quick comment and we conclude.
Ratib, your question about the Palestinian community or the Arab community, they're not mutually exclusive. In fact, they are reinforcing. A strong Palestinian community and a united community is definitely a strong Arab community, because you need that agency and you need that. In fact, if you are noticing some weakening in the Arab depth in America here, it's because of the Palestinian community's fragmentation and our inability to unite and to provide that one vision and that was one political channel. So they are not exclusive whatsoever, and we should work together. But Amir, Habibi, you've mentioned South Africa as an example, and you've mentioned Mandela, but you didn't go all the way. How much Mandela negotiated with the enemy, and how much Mandela stood as a leader against his people, and actually curved their will at one point in time to see their enemy and to actually open up for their enemy. And those nations who have managed to find a space and a place for their enemies survived. We should, all our movement is not just a movement in its own. Fatah or Hamas, the campus activism, you, Amr, and your work is not the objective. You are the tool. We are the tool. The objective is very clear, and we have to define it. We are not about delegitimizing only, and it is crucial to delegitimize illegality. But we are also about legitimizing ourselves, our national narratives, our national rights. And it is crucial in that process that we also provide not only ending our own injustice, but we should never be seen as creating new injustice. Otherwise, you will go nowhere, Habibi. You will have to have that parallel track. You will have to regain the initiative. You must retain the high moral grounds. Otherwise, you will be just, a negative person who just wants to, like a spoiled child, kick and scream. It's crucial that you do what you do in the campuses. It's crucial. That's a backbone. But it's crucial to allow and to trust others in a complementary manner that we need also to provide our... Do we, as a PLO, did we really recognize the state of Israel on the pre-1967? Yes, we did, Ahmed. We did. We did in a most historic compromise that has ever existed, foregoing 78% of our own land. Now, the problem is not with the Jews. You know that. And the problem, no. The problem is not with the Jews. Nor it should, Zionism was primarily about making it with the Jews. It's not with the Jews. Nor the problem is with the many Israelis who was born illegitimately in my own home. The issue is with the soldiers and with the settlers. And the issue with every Israeli institution inside Israel that is implicated in the illegality. And there are so many. And it is crucial. Look at the situation in Jerusalem in July and see how your people succeeded, because they were focused. There was one target, there was one united marching order, there was one method, and then we got what we wanted. So do your part. We should do our part. All Arab friends and depth, if you may, should do our part. But the one
American
thing,
friends.
huh?
And American
friends. The one thing, my friend, we should never do, ever, in Khawin Ba, to delegitimize each other. So if you don't boycott, we boycott you. If you don't do this, we do that. You are the older, you are the younger, you are that school. Trust you me, that has been our biggest enemy. Israel has discovered that they cannot defeat us via military. They cannot destroy our fortress from outside. The only way they can is from inside. That's why you've seen Gaza and the West Bank, Fatah and Hamas, all the rifts. And there are so many campaigns to actually attack our national immunity. We must trust each other. Give me once in history a Palestinian sold out. Give me once in history. Give me once in history a leader came and said, Jerusalem, we can compromise. Abu Ammar paid for his life on TV, in front of all of you, to defend your rights and the rights of the people in Jerusalem and everywhere else. I don't want to tell you about President Abbas. I have seen him, and I have seen I wish you know what he says in closed doors. You would consider him to be a hero. Nobody is selling. No Palestinian is selling. So why are we suspicious of each other? Why shouldn't we see that there is a need for this institution, and there is a need for our representation, there is a need for somebody who presents our negotiation position, and there is a need for somebody who would present our narrative, and there is a need for us to always appear as people who would always accommodate others, embrace others. Because you know why? Because we can. We can embrace others. We can accommodate others. We can live with others. They can't.
Yeah, last comment, please. Last comment.
I gotta go.
Yeah, just stand up and it will be fine. We'll hear you.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Miko Pellet. I'm sorry, I stand here with Amr and work on campuses and the attitude that he presented. I think it's I think that some of the things that, and I came late and I apologize. I think that we need to place limits on tolerance. I know that sounds like perhaps not the right thing to say, but do we invite the KKK to the table? Do we invite apartheid South Africa to the table and negotiate with them? Would we invite the Nazis? I mean, you know what I mean? So why do Zionists get a pass? And you know, all due respect, His Excellency, when the Palestinian secret police, the Mukhabarat, go after young Palestinian students, when they are the ones, the Palestinian police, who are shooting at young Palestinian students who are protesting against the occupation, when there's a sense here that all that Israel has done is misbehaved, when we know that 2 million people in Gaza have no water, it's more than misbehavior. There should be no room for that kind of tolerance. And I think that part of the problem is, and that's the last point I'll make, again, with all due respect, there isn't a shared vision. There isn't a shared goal. Because if all we talk about is Jerusalem and Hebron and Bethlehem, if we don't talk about the Negev deserts and the horrendous conditions in which Palestinian Bedouins are forced to live, if we do not talk about ethnic cleansing in the Galilee, then we don't have a shared vision here. So I think these are part of the problems that exist right now, and I think we all need to perhaps get together and refocus and make sure that we are indeed all working for the same goal.
Good.
Okay. Just please 1 minute each and we're concluding.
I'm going to pass my minute on. They get a minute and a half each. I'm a gracious person.
Thank you, Jim. You're always nice. Are you leaving?
No, I'm staying here.
Because I was going to say something about you.
I got your minute and a half. I'm going to hear it. For God's sake,
I fully respect and agree with you about what you said. That's what I was talking about in terms of the shared vision that's missing right now, because the situation used to be better actually 20 years ago. We had more of a shared vision. And a little bit longer than that, just to, again, the point I was making earlier with regards to respecting each other and doing like different, I never forget more than 25 years ago when your dad and I did a tour on campuses. Okay, he was brought here by Churches for Middle East Peace. And there is this Israeli general and this Palestinian kid. I was still in college. But I was willing.
More than 25 years ago.
More than that. I was willing to. I mean, people said, "Don't do that. Don't do that. You get burned." Okay, but frankly, it had a big impact on so many people to see. At the time, it wasn't that popular. I mean, like you guys are doing right now, and of course, your position is also way more advanced than, if you don't mind me saying that, than your dad's, but a lot different. But you know, to have again just the visual of an Israeli general and a young Palestinian challenging Israel's even legality and its occupation definitely of Palestine did have some fruit. I mean, we did benefit from that. A lot of people got impressed by that. Again, I mean, today, it probably doesn't make sense for me or anybody else to go around with an Israeli general. talking about things, because things have changed. The marketplace of ideas has changed. But definitely all of us focusing on Palestine, focusing on peace in the region, definitely need to get together and work on a common agenda. And no, some groups are not just because of diversity that we need to meet with everybody. No, there are some groups here I wouldn't sit with. There are some groups in Palestine I wouldn't sit with. And there are some groups in Israel, definitely, I wouldn't sit with. No.
And we have to distinguish, Mr. Palid, we have to distinguish, I hear you and I heard you, we have to distinguish between combating all the illegalities, combating Israeli soldiers and settlers who inflict a great deal of pain and terrorism on our own people, and between the long-term objective of trying to find a formula to live together. And we must mean it. It's not just a slogan, we must mean it. And I tell you, we do mean it. We do mean it. In the end, we believe that injustice should not end by creating a new injustice. And you know what? I will repeat this line 100 times to you, 100 times. The current Israeli government, and perhaps many other governments, has no place for us in our own home. We know that. The real game now is displacement and replacement. The real game is ethnic cleansing. We know that. We know they are only waiting for the next opportunity to transfer. They say it publicly. I don't need to tell you that. Go to the Likud platform, read it on the internet, you will know. Hear out their ministers now and you'll know they are public about it. But we have got to have a place for them. If we really want to engage in a real campaign, and if we really want to fight the fight in its all dimensions, we have got to. And I'll tell you this last thing. We may disagree with Trump in so many regards. We disagree with him that for his lack of embracing the two-state solution on the 67 borders. We disagree of the lack of clarity about the settlements, but we agree with him on one thing. There is only two options as a shared vision for us Palestinians. Two options. Either a state on the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem, all of East Jerusalem, من شارع واحد, if you know شارع واحد. All of East Jerusalem.
Southwest or southeast?
No. The capital of the state of Palestine, and resolving the outstanding issues, primarily the issue of refugees and their legitimate rights. That's option number one. That has been the option of the international community and the US successive governments for 50 years. Or, and you have heard the Palestinian president only a few weeks ago from the podium of the United Nations, not any other podium, one state, equal rights for all. And when President Trump said that, people say, what is he talking about? No, he's right. These are the only two options. But regardless of what is the institutional arrangements above our heads with the Palestinians, we must come together to fight for our collective national rights. Be it under a sovereign state of Palestine in the 67, or be it full equal rights in the historic land of Palestine, I think this is a shared value. I don't think we deviate from that. So much discussion here in the US and then the campuses and the very important people like you is about the goal, the objective, the end game. One state, two state. What we need to discuss, trust me on that, is the tools, the means. No matter how many objectives you have, if you don't garner the real means to get where you want to go, then keep discussing this. And it is such a diversion. As a nation, I think our shared vision is clear. We demand our national rights, be it in a two-state solution or on a one-state solution that will give us equal national, political, and civil rights. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all very, very much. Please, we are running out of time. I need to catch my train as well. Please stay where you are for 1 second only. I ask Father Michael McDonough to dismiss us with an ecumenical prayer. Ecumenical prayer.
Not economic?
No.
I don't know what an ecumenical prayer is. Heavenly Father, you are the author, the sustainer, and the perfecter of life. And through your prophet Micah, you told us that there was one thing you required, that we be just, to love honestly, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with you. Sadly, we so often leave you out of the equation. You are the sovereign one, the all-powerful. May we, your sons and daughters, learn from the persuasive power that Jesus had when he confronted the authorities of his day. His questioners were often silenced in their opposition. May all the men and women who are here and who speak and have a desire and a passion for truth and justice and peace come to you to seek that art of persuasion that is so lost in our noisy world, so that an economy of words will be sufficient to persuade hearts and minds to recognize truth. You are the truth that we must love. Fill our hearts with the passion for that, and may we go forth with a humility born of the realization that we are ordinary men and women, but with you, nothing is too great for ordinary men and women who put their trust in you, for you accomplish the extraordinary through the ordinary. Blessed be your holy name, now and forevermore. Amen.
Amen. All right, thank you all very, very much. Wonderful. Thank you.
Good job, y'all.
Thank you. Good luck on that.